Rushdie is ridiculing the religion and the Prophet. Dr. Ahmad Shboul in his office at Sydney University in April 1987, credit. He and Charles CugleyBut despite calls for violent revenge made by the spiritual leader of the world's Shi'ite communities, Ayatollah Khomeini, local Muslims are only just beginning to consider public protest. The Satanic Verses was released in Australia last November and, according to a spokeswoman for the publisher, has done very well. Copies are now scarce, pending the arrival of a new shipment later this month. The spokeswoman said no formal complaint had been received by the company, neither from Australia's Muslim community nor from anyone else. But she did ask that her name be suppressed. "We think it's the wisest course of action at this time," she said. Copies of the book in Sydney are very rare. Credit. Stephen Seward, Fairfax Media. Issue is the disrespect for Islam that local and overseas Muslim community leaders say Rushdie has displayed. What we have in this case is conflict between a writer who thinks nothing is sacred and a religious community whose faith has been slighted, said Dr. Shboul. Mr. Adib Mirabani, a counselor at the Muslim Welfare Center attached to the Lakamba Mosque, drew a parallel with recent protests over the film The Last Temptation of Christ. "As a Muslim I went down and demonstrated against that film," he said. "If someone takes an extreme view against the Islamic faith, I would treat the matter in the same way. All books that incite hatred should be banned." At Arncliffe, where the Al-Zahra Muslim Association is housed next door to the Shiite mosque, the community has decided to refrain from public comment on the issue. "All I can say is that people here are very, very upset by the book," a spokesman said. "And the book itself? No one who spoke to the Herald yesterday had actually read it." Dr. Shboul, however, had scanned a copy. "To tell you the truth, I found it pretty boring," he said. Coalition opposes banning novel. February 20, 1989, James Cockington. Senator Chris Petlick, the federal opposition spokesman on the environment and the arts, said yesterday that he did not approve the banning in Australia of Salman Rushdie's controversial novel The Satanic Verses. Senator Petlick was addressing a seminar at Sydney University entitled The Islamic Revolution, 10 Years On, which assessed the decade since the overthrow of the Shah of Iran. A cartoon of author Salman Rushdie, February 16, 1989, credit. Rocco Fazari, "I appreciate and accept the legitimacy of the calls for the book to be banned are withdrawn from those who find it offensive," Senator Petlick told the seminar, "in exactly the same way as I accept as legitimate the calls that have been made by members of my own faith for certain films to be withdrawn or not shown, but I do commend spokesmen for the Islamic community in Australia so far for having distanced themselves from any thought that physical violence is a legitimate means of achieving this." Asked if his statements indicated support for a possible ban on the book, Senator Petlick replied, "No, I don't believe in banning anything, including this book." He admitted that he had not read Rushdie's novel. Senator Petlick is something of an authority on Islamic politics and has visited Iran 3 times since July 1986. "My impression during these 3 recent visits to Iran has been one of overwhelming change. Personally, I find the people much more open and friendly to Westerners, although it helps if you look like an Australian rather than an American," he told the seminar, which also heard the Iranian ambassador, Mr. Mehdi Kondakabadi. Members of the Free Speech Committee and the Australian Society of Authors protest the decision of 2 booksellers not to sell copies of Salman Rushdie's novel on February 2, 1989, credit. Philip Wayne Locke, Fairfax Media. Talk of Sydney ban as copies dry up. February 23, 1989, by James Cockington. Since Ayatollah Khomeini helped turn Salman Rushdie's novel The Satanic Verses into headline news, public demand for the book is at fever pitch. Ironically, copies of the book in Sydney are very rare. A plane load of hardcover copies, express freighted from England and retailing for $35, is expected to go on sale later next week. But who will put it on their shelves? The Dymocks chain of bookshops has decided it will not stock the book. Other retailers are expected to follow suit. According to one book industry source, the major retailers are talking among themselves and may be considering a blanket ban on the book's sale. On the one hand, it's not our right to censor the book, said a manager of a major city store who asked not to be named. On the other hand, we wonder whether we should put our staff and the public at risk. There's a point where the dollars don't matter. There is general agreement that we should be careful about it. While there have been no violent protests from the local Islamic community, booksellers fear this could happen if the book is openly available. Public demand for the book is at fever pitch. A copy of the Satanic Verses is sold at the busy bookshop, George Street on March 10, 1989. Credit Stephen Seward, Fairfax Media. Not one bookshop contacted had a copy in stock. The City of Sydney Library in Pitt Street has one, but no one can borrow it yet. It should be available in a few weeks' time. The Ariel Bookshop in Paddington reports about 10 requests a day for copies. Since the newspaper stories broke, it claims every third or fourth person asks about it. It has 200 copies on back order. In Parramatta, Collins Booksellers says, about 1 million people every day are asking for copies. Penguin Books, which holds the publishing rights to the book, has already received 2,500 orders from booksellers around Australia for the $35 hardcover edition. According to Penguin's head office in Melbourne, these should be on the shelves from early next week. Local Muslims in Rushdie protest. Had the 1,000 or so chanting Muslims been in Mecca, no one would have looked twice. March 5, 1989. Credit Andrew Campbell. March 6, 1989. Sonia's Adel women, complete with black veils, trailed behind children, some in traditional dress but many sporting jeans and t-shirts, wove through the crowds. Men, fists clenched, led the shouting up front. Had the 1,000 or so chanting Muslims been in Mecca, no one would have looked twice. But through the quiet suburban streets of Arncliffe, the followers of Ayatollah Khomeini caused quite a stir. In the first public demonstration here against Salman Rushdie, the author of the controversial novel The Satanic Verses, Sydney's Islamic community supported the execution order by their leader. They also called on the Australian government to place an immediate ban on the book, which they have declared blasphemous. Sayyid Hashim Ahmad Nasrallah, the religious leader of some 100,000 Sydney Muslims, said through an interpreter, "The Muslims in all corners of the world cannot and will not accept any slander against the Prophet of Islam." The Ayatollah ruling, which was issued by Imam Khomeini against that apostate, Rushdie, is the rule of Islam. At 11 a.m. yesterday, the crowd gathered at Arncliffe Park carrying large portraits of the Ayatollah and posters depicting Rushdie as the devil. Children as young as 10 wore gowns saying, "Death to Rushdie." However, the herald was stopped from talking to them. The procession, keenly watched by police, wound its way 1 kilometer along Wollongong Road to the Al-Zahra Mosque where the Sayyid then spoke. To the encouragement and delight of the crowd, he said Muslims supported freedom of expression but not when it denigrated their religion. Mr. Ahmad Bazi, from the Al-Zahra Muslim Association, said the demonstration was only the beginning of protest action in Sydney and a much larger rally could take place in the city. "We will not be happy until Rushdie is dead and the book is banned," he said. Mr. Tony Katsiagiannis, the president of the Free Speech Committee, branded the demonstration as outrageous. While the fatwa remains in place as of February 2019, the government of Iranian President Mohammad Khatami said in 1998 it no longer supported the killing of Rushdie.